Am I streaming? Let me check this real quick. I can't tell. It should be. It says it is. I'm gonna believe that it is. I'm not even gonna check. Yeah, I'm gonna check. Hold on. Sorry. I want to just make sure this, is actually working. Yeah. All right. So it's unlocked. All right. Cool. So yeah, I'm about to start doing like news. All right, y'all. So I'm really about to start my second push. You know what I mean? My second year, and news has been like a part of the brand that I've been wanting to push out for a minute, but I haven't been able to because I gotta be honest, there's just a lot of shit to do to get all this shit to move. All right, so I'm finally getting to the news part of it, and shit's gotten crazy. You know what I'm saying? Like a year ago, when I started doing this, Trump wasn't president yet, so it just wasn't this crazy. But yeah, it's lit right now, y'all. You know what I mean? And so, I watch TV and I watch the news. I follow the news a lot. You know what I mean? I subscribe to the New York Times, and um, I see so much news just gets passed by. Nobody even talking about this shit. You know what I mean? And I feel like a lot of decisions would be easy if people actually really knew what's going on. And I'm talking about on the left side and the right side. Like, if you watch, I don't really watch CNN, but if you watch MSNBC, all they doing is talking about Trump. And if you watch Fox, all they doing is praising Trump. You know what I mean? And talk about how the Democrats are just weenies and suck. You know what I mean? And the Democrats are just flabbergasted that the Republicans are doing what they say they're going to do. So you know, they've been executing. 2025, Project 2025 has been executing. They've been doing a good job at executing it. You know what I'm saying? Whether you like it or not, they've been doing it. You know what I'm saying? And a lot of stuff is just getting passed by. Nobody's talking about this stuff at all, right? And so I want to be able to just kind of like put you on what I be learning, you know what I mean, on a daily basis about what's happening in the world and with the news. Is because I subscribe to the New York Times, I get these stories, and not everybody does. So that's what I'm about to do, y'all. Okay, I'm about to start running through, these New York Times stories, and then stopping through and like pointing out what I feel is, you know, necessary to point out based on what's being said because a lot of this stuff is convoluted. You know what I mean? But at the end of the day, I think it comes down to the elitists versus everybody, and that's just the end of the story. It's not a white thing, not a black thing, not a Republican thing or a Democrat thing. It's elitists versus everybody. And you got elitists, running around doing elitist stuff, and you got a lot of regular people just not even knowing what the fuck is going on. So hopefully I can put people on, at least my fans, at least the people who pay attention to me musically. Hopefully I can put y'all on what's going on so that, y'all won't be like dumb. So I'm just gonna listen to these stories. That's how I listen to it, anyways. I'm gonna be sitting here with you. You know what I mean? While we listen to them, and yeah, this one's kind of long. The first one's like 10, 15 minutes long, right? But other than that, they're like 3, 4 minutes. Okay. And so the first story that we're gonna listen to is about Russell Vought. He is Trump's like manager of the Office of Budget Management. And so what happens like whenever Trump does an executive order or something, it has to go to the lawyers. And after the lawyers, it goes to the Office of Budget Management. And then once it does that, then the executive order can go through. Well, Russell Vought was able to pretty much get rid of the lawyers, so they don't have to deal with that. And then it goes to him, and he just, is pretty much coming up with the ideas and improving them himself, right? Trump really isn't doing that. Him and Russell Vought and Stephen Miller are like the masterminds behind everything. And Trump is just, signing off. Trump's like, he's a real estate developer, so he's going to try to develop Gaza, and build a ballroom at the White House. You know what I'm saying? Like put up gold, like that's shit he like to do. Russell Vought, Stephen Miller, government, that's they shit. And I haven't read this article yet, but it's pretty much going to say that Russell Vought is that nigga, and he's like running his plan the way he is expecting it to. You know what I mean? And so, beginning it says Russell Vought spent years drawing up plans to expand presidential power, shrink the federal bureaucracy. Now he's moving closer to make that vision a reality, threatening to erode the checks and balances. All right, so let's listen to this story. You know what I mean? See what they got to say. Like you see, it's 16 minutes long. And I'm also seeing if I'm gonna get like strikes for like just playing their content like this. I don't know how it goes if I have to read it myself or actually could just like listen to it. So, but since I actually pay for it, I can listen to it. It's behind a paywall. You know what I mean? So let's get it.
The man behind Trump's push for an all-powerful presidency. This article is by Coral Davenport and read by an automated voice. Russell T. Vought, the White House budget director, was preparing the Trump administration's 2026 budget proposal this spring when his staff got some surprising news. Elon Musk's cost-cutting team was unilaterally axing items that Mr. Vought had intended to keep. Mr. Vought, a numbers wonk who rarely raises his voice, could barely contain his frustration, telling colleagues that he felt sidelined and undermined by the haphazard chaos of the Musk-led Department of Government Efficiency, according to 6 people with knowledge of his comments, who, like others interviewed for this article, spoke on the condition of anonymity for fear of retribution. We're going to let Doge break things, and we'll pick up the pieces later, Mr. Vought told his staff during one flash of irritation. According to 3 of those people, Mr. Vaught's spokeswoman, Rachel Colley, denied that he made those comments and that he felt frustrated by Mr. Musk. This had not been Mr. Vaught's plan. Mr. Vought, who also directed the White House Office of Management and Budget in President Trump's first term, had spent 4 years in exile from power. He worked through Joseph R. Biden Jr.'s presidency from an old row house near the Capitol, where he complained of pigeons infesting his ceiling and coordinated with other Trump loyalists to draw up sweeping, detailed plans for a comeback. He had carefully analyzed mistakes from the first term, and he had laid out steps to achieve the long-sought conservative goal of a president with dramatically expanded authority over the executive branch, including the power to cut off spending, fire employees, control independent agencies, and deregulate the economy. Mr. Musk, who spent more than $250 million to help elect Mr. Trump, had celebrity, access to the president, and political capital that the budget director could never hope for. But Mr. Vought, pronounced vote, had something Mr. Musk did not. He had done his homework. In the months since Mr. Musk fell out with the president, Mr. Vought has at last begun to put his plans into action, remaking the presidency block by block, by restoring powers weakened after the Nixon administration. His efforts are helping Mr. Trump exert authority more aggressively than any modern president, and are threatening an erosion of the long-standing checks and balances in America's constitutional system.
So real quick, I did not know that they pulled back stuff after Nixon. That's interesting. That's something to look into.
Now, as the government heads toward a shutdown when federal funding lapses on Tuesday, Mr. Vought, 49, is leveraging the moment to further advance his goals of slashing agencies and purging employees, with his office telling agencies to prepare for mass firings unless Congress can strike a deal to keep the government open. The ultimatum follows a string of achievements for Mr. Vought. This summer, he pressured lawmakers to enact his plan to cancel $9 billion for foreign aid and public broadcasting that they had previously approved, an unusual blow by Congress to the White House. The new law claimed another prize for conservatives, the death of the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. And a deal Mr. Vought cut with House Republicans helped secure passage of Mr. Trump's domestic policy law that slashed spending on Medicaid and food stamps. He has spearheaded a push to erase hundreds of regulations on the environment, health, transportation, and food and worker safety, telling Mr. Trump at an August cabinet meeting that his efforts had led to 245 deregulatory initiatives this year. He has asserted White House power over independent agencies like the Federal Reserve, championing an executive order that forced them to submit their regulatory actions to his office for approval. As the acting head of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the agency charged with enforcing rules to protect people from predatory financial practices, he halted nearly all of the agency's work and sought to fire 90% of its staff. At the heart of Mr. Vaught's plan, associates say, is the intentional engineering of a legal battle over Congress's power to decide how government money is spent, potentially creating a new legal precedent for the president to block spending on any programs and policies he dislikes. The next step in the fight is a legally untested maneuver in which the Trump administration would cancel another $4.9 billion in foreign aid spending, this time without congressional approval. The gambit, known as a pocket rescission, involves the White House eliminating the spending unless Congress votes to stop it by September 30th, the end of the fiscal year. The threat has enraged many lawmakers, including some Republicans. Senator Susan Collins, the chairwoman of the Appropriations Committee, called it illegal. But as the deadline has neared, they have done nothing to stop it. Mr. Vaught is confident that the White House would win a Supreme Court battle over the moves to stop spending, according to his associates. He is lining up the billiard shots, getting each ball in place one by one for each consecutive move, said Grover Norquist, the anti-tax activist. For the leaders of Mr. Trump's Make America Great Again movement, Mr. Vaught is seen as the disciplined architect who channeled the passion of MAGA into an actionable policy blueprint. The slain activist Charlie Kirk, whose podcast was one of many where Mr. Vaught regularly shared his views with the Republican base, called Mr. Vaught an absolute rock star. To many legal experts, Mr. Vaught's work is a threat to the foundations of democracy. One of the main sources of power that Congress has over the executive branch is the budget, said Eloise Pasakhoff, a law professor at Georgetown University. If the executive branch isn't controlled by the power of the purse, then there is very little that will control the president. She added, "It's a fundamental challenge to liberty for every single person in America." Mr. Vaught, who declined through his spokeswoman to be interviewed, sees it differently. He said in a speech earlier this month that his mission was to bring to heel an unelected federal bureaucracy he likened to a cartel working behind closed doors. "We have now been embarked on deconstructing this administrative state," he said. "Step after step, it's to move quickly, trying to think through what the founders would have done in the circumstances, and be aggressive." Over the years, Mr. Vaught has made clear how he views his targets. He has said the Education Department promotes.
So, when they talk about the founders, you got to know that 30% of the founders still wanted there to be slaves. So, he's probably talking about that percentage.
Woke rot propaganda like grooming minors for so-called gender transition, that the Federal Reserve has been wrong for decades, that the State Department and the U.S. Agency for International Development actively embarrass the United States, that the Internal Revenue Service targets struggling families in a craven effort to sustain the broader bureaucracy's radical progressive agenda. And in a remark captured on video unearthed by ProPublica that stung many in Washington, he said he wanted federal employees to be in trauma.
Damn.
Once the budget director has the power to starve those government agencies, Mr. Vaught has said, they can wither away. We want to make sure that the bureaucracy can't reconstitute itself later in future administrations,
Yeesh.
he said on Mr. Kirk's podcast.
Yeesh.
MAGA's bulldog.
Y'all, they really trying to break the government. Not really, y'all. They really breaking the government in half.
Mr. Vaught started envisioning a blueprint to slash the federal government long before Mr. Trump was a Republican. He grew up the youngest of 7 children in a religious blue-collar family in Trumbull, Can. His father, a Marine Corps veteran, was a union electrician, and his mother was a public school teacher.
Wow.
In Mr. Vaught's telling, he grew up watching his parents dragged down by big government. "My parents worked really long hours to put me through school," he said at his first Senate confirmation hearing. "But they also worked long hours to pay for the government in their lives, and I have often wondered what they would have been free to build and give without such a high burden."
Wow.
After graduating from Wheaton College, an evangelical Christian school in Illinois, Mr. Vaught went to Washington to work for Senator Phil Gramm of Texas, a Republican champion of fiscal austerity. Mr. Graham recalled his young staff member as prodigiously hardworking, attending law school by night while working by day to help his boss shrink the government. "Russ worked for me as a child, and I'm proud of what he's doing now," said Mr. Graham, who retired from the Senate in 2002. Mr. Vaught went on to direct budget policy for House Republicans during the rise of the Tea Party movement, when populist demand for smaller government propelled a wave of hardline conservatives into Washington. It was not a given that he would join the first Trump administration. Mr. Vaught, who friends say is deeply driven by his faith and often leads adult Bible study classes at his Baptist church, considered opting out of Washington to attend seminary and become a pastor. In 2017, he heeded the call of the White House.
So yeah, you hear this guy, the guy that is like breaking up the government wanted to be a pastor, y'all. Come on, like this, just don't make sense to me, y'all. Just don't add up.
During Mr. Trump's first term, Mr. Vaught argued that the president had the power to block federal spending Congress had approved. He was part of a group of White House officials who froze military spending for Ukraine in defiance of Congress, paving a path to the president's impeachment. He also helped come up with the idea of using emergency powers to build a border wall without congressional approval, and pushed an executive order that could have enabled the president to easily fire tens of thousands of career civil servants. The budget office was eventually forced to restore the Ukraine money, and the other moves were reversed by the Biden administration.
See, so that's what happened to him last presidency. So when he came in this time, he was like, oh, yeah, okay, I know, I got y'all niggas.
After the 2020 election, Mr. Vaught started the Center for Renewing America, a think tank devoted to sustaining Mr. Trump's policies. The clawing of either rats or pigeons in his office walls was so loud that it distracted visitors, according to a recent book, Madhouse, but Mr. Vaught remained focused on his mission. In 2022, he released a 104-page shadow budget, a prescription to remove the scourge of woke and weaponized bureaucracy aimed at the American people, deep cuts to Medicaid, foreign aid, scientific research, and other programs. Outraged when Kevin McCarthy, the Republican House Speaker, cut a deal with Mr. Biden to raise the debt ceiling, Mr. Vaught pushed House Republicans to take the extraordinary step of ousting their leader.
Wow.
Mr. Vaught was a constant...
Wow, he got McCarthy. Come on, I told you, Vaught is really running this shit on the background.
Presence in the group text thread of the House Freedom Caucus, the hardline conservatives who toppled Mr. McCarthy, bucking them up and pushing them to take what felt like an enormous political risk, said former Representative Matt Gaetz of Florida, who led the effort. When people got scared or concerned about political impact, committee assignments, he was always there, strongly encouraging them, Mr. Gaetz said. He was instilling backbone in people. Mr. Vaught's public comments began to take on a more hardline tilt. His think tank published papers establishing a rationale for why it would be lawful to deploy troops on U.S. soil and advocating the elimination of the post-Watergate norm of Justice Department independence. Stephen K. Bannon, the former Trump advisor whose War Room podcast is popular with the base, declared him MAGA's bulldog. Back to the White House. After Mr. Trump won a second term, Mr. Vaught devoted himself to preparing for a do-over, one that was bigger, bolder, and crucially lasting. Eyeing his next role, Mr. Vaught described how the White House budget director would be critical in transforming the federal government. Presidents use the OMB to tame the bureaucracy, the administrative state, he told conservative commentator Tucker Carlson days after the 2024 election. Mr. Vaught's research was featured in Project 2025, the policy blueprint prepared by the Conservative Heritage Foundation for Mr. Trump's return to office. Mr. Vaught also drafted potential executive orders. But tensions emerged soon after Mr. Musk parachuted into Washington with a mandate to upend the federal bureaucracy. Mr. Vaught was outraged when DOJ sowed chaos by sending out an email requiring federal workers to detail 5 accomplishments each week or lose their jobs, said 3 people with knowledge of the matter. Mr. Vaught supported purging federal workers, but complained that the email had skirted the legal process for personnel matters, creating what he saw as needless liability. While Mr. Vaught has called for the abolition of the Education Department, he was annoyed when DOJ moved to dismantle the agency's data office, which tracks student academic performance. According to 2 people familiar with the events, the administration needed the data to inform efforts to discourage race-based college admissions, cut certain programs for poor and disabled students, and promote charter schools, these people said.
Yeah, that's crazy, y'all. They don't try to promote charter schools and cut poor and disabled kids. Come on, y'all. Like, y'all are fucking mean.
Mr. Vaught's spokeswoman, Ms. Colley, called the accounts of those episodes false. Mr. Musk and his representatives did not respond to requests for comment. Mr. Vaught later restored portions of the office, but with limited staffing. The Education Department has posted job openings to refill some of the positions. DOJ would have been far more effective from day one had they bothered to ask Russ and team how to achieve their goals, said Joe Grogan, a friend of Mr. Vaught's, who led the White House Domestic Policy Council in the first Trump administration.
Yeah, I believe that.
Now, in the post-Musk era, Mr. Vaught appears to be relishing his moment. He works long hours and weekends in his suite in the Eisenhower Executive Office Building next to the White House, where he oversees a staff of more than 500.
Ooh,
On the wall is a
God
photo
damn.
of his favorite president, Calvin Coolidge. The farm boy and small-town mayor historians say most purely embodied the conservative principles of small government and fiscal austerity.
Interesting.
Around his home in a Virginia suburb,
We gotta look up Calvin Coolidge, y'all. I'm gonna look up Calvin Coolidge.
his neighbors, including former federal workers who lost their jobs under the Trump administration, have planted lawn signs that read, "We support our federal employees." In the White House, Mr. Vaught is not seen as a part of Mr. Trump's inner circle, according to 4 people with knowledge of the dynamics. He regularly quotes the Bible and never curses, a sharp contrast with a president who sometimes refers to Christians in the third person. But people familiar with the relationship between the two men say that the president recognizes in Mr. Vaught something that he highly values, a seasoned loyalist who knows how to use the federal budget to deliver what Mr. Trump wants. Russ knows exactly how to dismantle the deep state and end weaponized government, Mr. Trump wrote in a statement when...
See what I mean? So Russ is doing it. Russ is dismantling the government. Not Trump, Russ.
Nominating Mr. Vaught. Now Mr. Vaught is building the case to achieve one of his primary objectives, securing the president's authority to block congressionally approved spending on programs he dislikes. To that end, Mr. Vaught is laying the groundwork for a legal battle over the Impoundment Control Act of 1974, enacted by Congress in the wake of President Richard Nixon's moves to block agency spending he opposed. Mr. Vaught, who says the law is unconstitutional, would like to see it overturned. That goal has driven him to his...
Oh, so Nixon was trying to do the same thing. Okay. Yeah. So if they're going to challenge the law, they're going to take that to Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court is going to say yes, because they're the bros too.
Current pocket rescissions package. Mr. Vaught's friends say that his actions are designed to provoke a lawsuit from the Government Accountability Office, the congressional watchdog, which has said the pocket rescission is illegal and would cede Congress's power of the purse. Russ absolutely believes he is on sound legal footing and that he will be vindicated at the Supreme Court, Mr. Grogan said. Etta Emanuele Perez, the general counsel of the Government Accountability Office, disagreed, saying in an interview, "In order to not spend the money, the laws would have to be changed, and the president does not have the unilateral power to change the laws." Rob Fairweather, who spent 42 years
The Supreme Court, yes, they do.
at the Office of Management and Budget and wrote a book about how it operates, said there is reason for Mr. Vaught to have confidence in a legal victory. "What he's doing is radical, but it's well thought out," Mr. Fairweather said.
Correct.
"He's had all these years to plan. He's looked clearly at the authorities and boundaries that are there, and is pushing past them on the assumption that at least some of it will hold up in the courts." Mr. Vaught is already looking forward to that outcome, declaring on Glenn Beck's show this spring, "We will have a much smaller bureaucracy as a result of it." Stacey Cowley and Charlie Savage contributed reporting. Kitty Bennett and Teresa Mondria Terrell contributed research.
Yeah, so, at the end of the day, the federal government is going to be downsized. It is being downsized considerably. We even going to see if they even keep it open past the shutdown. And if you depend on the federal government for anything, even kind of the state governments, because the state governments get a lot of their money from the federal governments, it's going to be interesting. If your business depends on it, if your kids dependent on it, yeah, I personally already lost my health care, So, it's happening. If you, voted for Trump, you think it wasn't going to happen, it's happening. If you didn't vote for Trump, it doesn't even matter. The Democrats put up the worst possible candidates in the whole world. They would have put up anybody that was like a living white male. Trump wouldn't have got the presidency. You know what I'm saying? Anybody. But anyways, they got it now. The government of the United States that we used to know, it is over. There will be a new one. And we just have to keep making it through it. So yeah, that's the Russell Vaught story. So the next one is the Gaza plan. So, they want to They want to redo Gaza. And if you don't know anything about the history of Gaza, it always gets blown up and rebuilt and blown up and rebuilt. For thousands of years, it's just been the story. It's always been Gaza. It's always been outside of Israel. It's always been this little strip. And I think the Egyptians have always kind of like managed it. It's been like they low key little spot. I think I could be wrong. Um, but yeah, Gaza's getting blown up again. And we're gonna see how it gets rebuilt. They talking about rebuilding it.
Here is the full text of the Gaza plan released by the White House. This article is by the New York Times and read by an automated voice. The White House released a lengthy plan on Monday calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and laying out plans for the territory. The conditions include many proposals that have long been rejected by Hamas. Here is the full text of the proposal provided by the White House. Gaza will be a de-radicalized, terror-free zone that does not pose a threat to its neighbors. Gaza will be redeveloped for the benefit of the people of Gaza, who have suffered more than enough. If both sides agree to this proposal, the war will immediately end. Israeli forces will withdraw to the agreed-upon line to prepare for a hostage release. During this time, all military operations, including aerial and artillery bombardment, will be suspended, and battle lines will remain frozen until conditions are met for the complete staged withdrawal. Within 72 hours of Israel publicly accepting this agreement, all hostages, alive and deceased, will be returned. Once all hostages are released, Israel will release 250 life sentence prisoners plus 1,700 Gazans who were detained after October 7, 2023, including all women and children detained in that context. For every Israeli hostage whose remains are released, Israel will release the remains of 15 deceased Gazans. Once all hostages are returned, Hamas members who commit to peaceful coexistence and to decommission their weapons will be given amnesty. Members of Hamas who wish to leave Gaza will be provided safe passage to receiving countries. Upon acceptance of this agreement, full aid will be immediately sent into the Gaza Strip. At a minimum, aid quantities will be consistent with what was included in the January 19, 2025 agreement regarding humanitarian aid, including rehabilitation of infrastructure, water, electricity, sewage, rehabilitation of hospitals and bakeries, and entry of necessary equipment to remove rubble and open roads. Entry of distribution and aid in the Gaza Strip will proceed without interference from the two parties through the United Nations and its agencies and the Red Crescent, in addition to other international institutions not associated in any manner with either party. Opening the Rafah crossing in both directions will be subject to the same mechanism implemented under the January 19, 2025 agreement. Gaza will be governed under the temporary transitional governance of a technocratic, apolitical Palestinian committee responsible for delivering the day-to-day running of public services and municipalities for the people in Gaza. This committee will be made up of qualified Palestinians and international experts, with oversight and supervision by a new international transitional body, the Board of Peace, which will be headed and chaired by President Donald J. Trump, with other members and heads of state to be announced, including former Prime Minister Tony Blair. This body will set the framework and handle the funding.
They just said Donald Trump is trying to take over the fucking Gaza Strip. They just said Donald's going to be in charge of the Gaza Strip, y'all. Did you just hear that? That's crazy.
For the redevelopment of Gaza until such time as the Palestinian Authority has completed its reform program, as outlined in various proposals, including President Trump's peace plan in 2020 and the Saudi-French proposal, and can securely and effectively take back control of Gaza. This body will call on best international standards to create modern and efficient governance that serves the people of Gaza and is conducive to attracting investment. A Trump economic development plan to rebuild and energize Gaza will be created by convening a panel of experts who have helped birth some of the thriving modern miracle cities in the Middle East. Many thoughtful investment proposals and exciting development ideas have been crafted by well-meaning international groups and will be considered to synthesize the security and governance frameworks to attract and facilitate these investments that will create jobs, opportunity, and hope for future Gaza. A special economic zone will be established with preferred tariff and access rates to be negotiated with participating countries. No one will be forced to leave Gaza, and those who wish to leave will be free to do so and free to return. We will encourage people to stay and offer them the opportunity to build a better Gaza. Hamas and other factions agree to not have any role in the governance of Gaza, directly, indirectly, or in any form. All military, terror, and offensive infrastructure, including tunnels and weapon production facilities, will be destroyed and not rebuilt. There will be a process of demilitarization of Gaza under the supervision of independent monitors, which will include placing weapons permanently beyond use through an agreed process of decommissioning, and supported by an internationally funded buyback and reintegration program, all verified by the independent monitors. New Gaza will be fully committed to building a prosperous economy and to peaceful coexistence with their neighbors. A guarantee will be provided by regional partners to ensure that Hamas and the factions comply with their obligations and that New Gaza poses no threat to its neighbors or its people. The United States will work with Arab and international partners to develop a temporary international stabilization force, ISF, to immediately deploy in Gaza. The ISF will train and provide support to vetted Palestinian police forces in Gaza and will consult with Jordan and Egypt, who have extensive experience in this field. This force will be the long-term internal security solution. The ISF will work with Israel and Egypt to help secure border areas, along with newly trained Palestinian police forces. It is critical to prevent munitions from entering Gaza and to facilitate the rapid and secure flow of goods to rebuild and revitalize Gaza. A deconfliction mechanism will be agreed upon by the parties. Israel will not occupy or annex Gaza. As the ISF establishes control and stability, the Israel Defense Forces, IDF, will withdraw based on standards, milestones, and timeframes linked to demilitarization that will be agreed upon between the IDF, ISF, the guarantors, and the United States, with the objective of a secure Gaza that no longer poses a threat to Israel, Egypt, or its citizens. Practically, the IDF will progressively hand over the Gaza territory it occupies to the ISF according to an agreement they will make with the Transitional Authority until they are withdrawn completely from Gaza, save for a security perimeter presence that will remain until Gaza is properly secure from any resurgent terror threat. In the event Hamas delays or rejects this proposal, the above, including the scaled-up aid operation, will proceed in the terror-free areas handed over from the IDF to the ISF. An interfaith dialogue process will be established based on the values of tolerance and peaceful coexistence to try and change mindsets and narratives of Palestinians and Israelis by emphasizing the benefits that can be derived from peace. While Gaza redevelopment advances, and when the PA reform program is faithfully carried out, the conditions may finally be in place for a credible pathway to Palestinian self-determination and statehood, which we recognize as the aspiration of the Palestinian people. The United States will establish a dialogue between Israel and the Palestinians to agree on a political horizon for peaceful and prosperous coexistence.
It's interesting. It is a plan. I don't like the whole Donald Trump is like in charge of it. It should be like, someone elected should be in charge of it. You know what I mean? That's the whole thing. Like, you know what I mean? It's just his. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's crazy. Oh, small businesses, tariff struggle. Yeah, supposedly small businesses are having a rough time because of the tariffs. We're about to find out.
Small businesses wither under Trump's tariffs. It's hard to breathe.
Damn.
This article is by Sydney Ember and read by an automated voice. President Trump's tariffs are straining the backbone of the United States economy. While many larger companies have integrated soaring levies that kicked in last month into their businesses without raising prices for customers, a growing number of smaller businesses are confronting a make-or-break moment. Many small businesses lacked the funds or storage capacity to stockpile goods before Mr. Trump's tariffs kicked in. They have been reluctant to lift prices because they do not want to drive away customers. That has made some particularly vulnerable to the recent price shocks, leaving them with deteriorating profit margins and no easy choices. Because small businesses are crucial drivers of employment and growth, their health could have far-reaching implications in an uncertain economy. It's hard to breathe, said Brandon Mills, the chief executive of Total Promotion Company, a small business in Las Vegas that makes promotional products, custom apparel, and merchandise. Mr. Mills, who imports most of the company's apparel and printing materials from China, said the swelling cost of tariffs has so eroded his margins on some orders that he often wonders if he would have been better off not fulfilling them. To help compensate for the higher expenses, he has been reducing other costs. A few months ago, he laid off one of the company's 7 workers, an embroiderer. During a bad stretch when orders were low and cash flow dwindled, he asked his bank to extend a line of credit so he could keep paying the bills. He has lifted prices on garments and other items, but he is wary of imposing additional costs because he does not want to further depress demand. It's difficult to have to survive because of poor policy, Mr. Mills said. Jerome H. Powell, the chair of the Federal Reserve, hinted this month at the challenges that small businesses face, saying after the central bank lowered interest rates that companies that sit between the exporter and the consumer are bearing the brunt of the tariffs. If you buy something and you sell it through retail, or you use it to make a product, you're probably taking a lot of those costs on and not able to pass it fully along to the consumer yet, Mr. Powell said. All of those companies and entities in the middle, they'll tell you that they have every intention of passing that through in time, but they're not doing that now. According to a recent analysis by the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta, 86% of companies in the United States that import goods by sea, the most common means of international trade, have fewer than 50 employees. But unlike bigger companies with diverse supply chains, smaller firms typically import goods from one supplier and one country, it found. That makes them susceptible to sharp increases in tariffs and gives them less leverage to negotiate favorable pricing terms with suppliers. At the same time, small businesses typically do not have the financial resources to rejigger supply chains away from highly tariffed countries. Small importers may be relatively more constrained in their ability to weather higher trade costs or switch suppliers, and as a result, might experience defaults and bankruptcies, the analysis found. Most economic data does not yet reflect the strain from tariffs that small businesses say they are under, in part because many of the most onerous tariffs have only been in place since August. A gauge of small business optimism from the National Federation of Independent Business ticked up in August. Holly Wade, the executive director of the Federation's Research Center, said distress is concentrated in sectors such as retail and wholesale trade that are most exposed to tariffs and is not yet being felt more broadly. Small business owners seem to be generally in favor of the current environment, notwithstanding those businesses that are more negatively impacted by specific policy shifts, she said. Economists expect more evidence to emerge once the tariffs have been in place longer. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development on Tuesday said that Mr. Trump's tariffs are pressuring consumers and labor markets. And Mr. Trump on Thursday said he would add tariffs of up to 100% on goods, including furniture, kitchen cabinets, and some drugs starting October 1st. Small businesses are likely to feel a stronger pinch when the tax year ends, and they assess their revenue and payroll numbers more closely, said Andrew Chamberlain, the principal economist at Gusto, which provides payroll and related services to small businesses. It's just a matter of time before some businesses that are right on the margin anyway are having to scale back, he said. An annual survey that Gusto conducted in August and September of 1,140 customers found that 50% of companies thought tariffs had hurt their business this year, and 56% expected them to do so next year. Kimberly Hyde, the owner of Beat and Amp Yarrow, a flower shop in Denver, said she was caught off guard by how much the trade policy would drain her business. I don't know why it didn't occur to me that flowers would also be tariffed, said Ms. Hyde, who sells flowers from countries including Colombia and Ecuador and ceramic and metal vases from China and India. At first, wholesalers said they were holding off on raising prices. Then in June and July, she noticed that some were tacking an extra 15% onto their costs. For items such as candle holders, she has been increasing prices, but not enough to offset the new expenses because she does not think customers will pay so much. She has attempted to make up for the tariffs in more subtle ways. For example, she is excluding 1 or 2 stems from flower arrangements that are priced just under $100 rather than raise the price. Above all, she said, the tariffs have made it harder to keep track of costs. She frequently wonders whether her invoices are reflecting higher prices because of tariffs or other reasons. It's just a lot to keep track of, she said. I'm not even sure what all is happening.
Man.
Mr. Trump's tariffs have also inspired a flood of small businesses to speak out more publicly. Lori Andre, who owns Lori's Shoes, a women's shoe and clothing store with 3 locations in the Chicago area, hosted a news conference earlier this year with Senator Richard J. Durbin, Democrat of Illinois, and talked about how the tariffs have damaged her business at a town hall in July. We don't have that same buying power or negotiating power that a lot of large corporations have, she said in an interview. It's small independents like us that are really feeling the squeeze. Ms. Andre, who started Lori's Shoes 43 years ago, said that she was trying urgently to keep her company afloat. She raised prices by a minimum of 10%. She laid off 1 worker this summer and is not offering pay raises this year to the rest of her roughly 35 employees. When Mr. Trump threatened in July to impose 30% tariffs on the European Union, where she buys footwear for her store's private label, she made a snap decision to fly in some shoes before the levies took hold, only to have Mr. Trump ultimately lower the base rate to 15%. Still, the company paid $74,000 in duties on fall orders from Italy, twice as much as it would have paid in previous years. The additional tariffs have ravaged her bottom line. When we look at the total picture, we are going to survive, she said. Will we make as much profit? No, we won't.
So what they saying right now on that, y'all, is like with the tariffs and stuff, we as consumers aren't feeling it, right? The money is supposed to shift to the consumer. The tax is supposed to shift to the consumer. Right now, they're saying it's shifting to the small business owner. They're eating it all. You know what I mean? And the small business owner is American, right? And so who is not having to pay the money are the really rich elitists that own the big companies. They're the ones who usually pay all that money, right? And those are the ones who are shifted away. So it's kind of messed up, you know what I mean? That, you know, they're probably going to put a lot of more small businesses out of business, and so that we have to depend on them even more, you know what I mean? So if you go to small business, go to it. Make it work.
With scant information, federal workers brace for possible shutdown. This article is by Eileen Sullivan and read by an automated voice. Even before most federal agencies had shared their plans for a possible government shutdown this week, the White House delivered a message that resonated across the bureaucracy. A funding lapse could be used as an opportunity for even more layoffs. With days left before the government runs out of money at 12:01 a.m. on Wednesday, federal workers were grappling with a deepening sense of uncertainty about the ramifications if congressional leaders cannot come to an agreement over the budget. Agencies have been slow to post their contingency plans for how they would operate, and the threat issued by the White House that the administration would use a shutdown to fire more workers has fueled even more anxiety across the federal workforce, already stretched thin by the administration's mass terminations and cuts. Around 300,000 employees are set to be off the payroll by the end of the year. The federal workers who remain are now facing the prospect of going without pay for an indefinite period or possibly even losing their jobs. Shutdowns are always bad for the country, causing disruption in government services and testing economic stability, said Michael Linden, a senior policy fellow at the Washington Center for Equitable Growth, a liberal think tank focused on inequality. But this one could be even worse than in the past, he warned, including the longest government shutdown to date, which occurred during the first Trump administration. This administration is throwing more uncertainty and more threats of pain, of deliberate pain, which is quite unusual, said Mr. Linden, who worked at the Office of Management and Budget during the Biden administration. It's even unusual compared to the last time they were in office. Sharing shutdown plans publicly is helpful for businesses, state governments, and everyone else who interacts with the federal government to offer a general sense of what to expect, he noted. But to not have any plans at all has created even more uncertainty and really conveys, I think, a sense of like, we don't care how the public feels about this, Mr. Linden added.
Correct.
The White House did not respond to a request for comment. Not every federal worker would be sent home in a shutdown. those designated as essential to protecting life and property, including law enforcement, must keep working, albeit usually without pay. Other employees are furloughed. As a possible shutdown nears, federal workers described feeling deeply demoralized and worried a funding lapse could be used to further shrink the government. It's just re-traumatizing folks who have been waiting for their jobs to get cut because they understand the administration does not believe that federal employees are important, said Kevin Owen, an employment lawyer who is representing many of the workers who lost their jobs this year. During the last shutdown, which started on December 22, 2018, and lasted for 35 days, not every federal agency was affected. Congress had already passed spending legislation to fund the military, Veterans Affairs, the Postal Service, and programs like Social Security and Medicaid, while money ran out for others that lawmakers could not agree on. This year, none of the 12 appropriations bills have passed both chambers. That means active duty members of the military would be among those working without pay this year.
Wow.
Federally funded childcare would be interrupted in some parts of the country if a shutdown stretched into days or weeks. Federal grocery vouchers for low-income mothers and children would be unavailable if the funding lapse exceeded 7 days.
Wow.
Social Security and Medicare payments would continue to go out, but benefits would not be verified and new cards would not be issued. According to the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, not every federal agency was affected.
Do you hear? Hold on. She's about to say what is about to fucking happen. No, y'all don't hear this shit. You don't hear what the fuck she just said. Last time they already had this stuff through when they shut down the government, right? So it just kept going. You know what I mean? By the time they got to start back up, they got the bills moving, right? This is what she just said is about to happen, y'all. In a couple weeks.
Congress had already passed spending legislation to fund the military, Veterans Affairs, the Postal Service, and programs like Social Security and Medicaid, while money ran out for others that lawmakers could not agree on. This year, none of the 12 appropriations bills have passed both chambers.
Oh, shit.
That means active duty members of the military would be among those working without pay this year. Federally funded childcare would be interrupted in some parts of the country if a shutdown stretched into days or weeks. Federal grocery vouchers for low-income mothers and children would be unavailable if the funding lapse exceeded 7 days. Social Security and Medicare payments would continue to go out, but benefits would not be verified and new cards would not be issued, according to the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. At the Environmental Protection Agency, biologists, toxicologists, and federal inspectors of chemical facilities and drinking water systems are typically not considered essential. If there is a toxic chemical spill or other emergency, the EPA would recall necessary staff, according to Justin Chen, president of the American Federation of Government Employees Council 238, which represents many EPA employees. But because of the staff cuts and resignations this year, the pool of employees available to call in is much smaller. The Federal Emergency Management Agency would be in a similar situation if a major storm struck the United States during a shutdown. The agency would take longer to help affected communities because fewer employees would be available to respond compared to past shutdowns, according to 6 FEMA employees. Conservationists and supporters of the country's national parks are concerned that the Trump administration will insist that parks stay open during a shutdown, as it did the last time. Because so many employees were furloughed in 2018, many parks forced to remain open dealt with overflowing toilets, piles of trash, and damage to fragile ecosystems. At California's Joshua Tree National Park, some visitors illegally drove off-road vehicles through the desert and cut down the spiky leaf Joshua trees for which the park is named. Nearly 40 former park superintendents sent a letter Friday to Interior Secretary Doug Burgum, imploring him to close the parks if the government shutters to avoid irreparable damage at a time when firings and resignations have already stretched staff. The Interior Department, which includes the National Park Service, did not respond to questions about its plans for a shutdown. But 2 people briefed on the matter said the Park Service was aiming to minimize the impact of a shutdown on visitors, which could include keeping parks open. During the last shutdown, the administration used funds from fee collections at parks that were designated for addressing postponed maintenance projects and improvements to facilities to cover routine maintenance and janitorial costs so that at least some trash was collected. The Government Accountability Office later determined that maneuver was an illegal use of funds. The Watchdog Office also found the administration had illegally issued food vouchers ahead of schedule. By law, federal employees are entitled to back pay when the government reopens, but that does not always come immediately. During the 5 weeks of the last shutdown, many workers struggled and had to take payday loans, said Doreen Greenwald, the national president of the National Treasury Employees Union, which represents about 150,000 federal workers across 37 agencies.
Oh my God.
Nothing is gained through a shutdown, she said. It's not just about federal employees. It's about the federal employees delivering for the American people. Yeah. Lisa Friedman and Maxine Joselo contributed reporting.
Y'all, I can't believe this shit, y'all. This shit is really about to happen. Nobody's ready for this. That's why I'm doing this news shit right now. I should be focused on while pushing out the music. But nobody's ready for this, dude. Like, it takes a time for it to trickle down, but they're breaking this in half. I don't know, it's kind of like the same story. Which ones will continue? You know what I mean?
Which federal benefits and services continue during a government shutdown? This article is by Madeline No and read by an automated voice. With the federal government headed toward a potential shutdown this week, thousands of workers could be furloughed and operations could be disrupted at many agencies. But not all government programs would come to a halt. Some essential work, such as law enforcement and airport security screening, would continue. Federal benefits programs like Social Security would also continue payments. Here is how some government functions would be affected during a shutdown. Which federal benefits would continue? Social Security is considered mandatory, and funding for those programs is generally unaffected by a shutdown. Medicare benefits also continue uninterrupted. The federal government has enough money for Medicaid to fund the first quarter of the next fiscal year, according to the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services.
Okay.
There could be lapses for some services, though. The federal government might not be able to issue replacement Medicare cards, for instance. The Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, which provides food benefits to roughly 42 million people, is not expected to be immediately disrupted, but payments could be affected later in the year, depending on how long a shutdown lasts and how much contingency funding remains. A spokesperson for the Agriculture Department, which administers SNAP, said in a statement that the USDA is prepared for all contingencies regarding department operations, including critical services and supports, but the department did not provide more details on how much funding is available. Veterans would still be provided medical care and pension benefits, but some services within the Department of Veterans Affairs, such as career counseling, would not be provided. Which federal programs would end? It's difficult to know exactly which programs or services would immediately end if the government shuts down this week, given that agencies have been slow to release their latest contingency plans, but agencies have warned about potential effects during similar episodes. Access to the Special Supplemental Nutrition Program for women, infants, and children, commonly known as WIC, could be affected. The program would not have enough funding left to accept new applicants starting October 1st, according to a White House official who spoke on the condition of anonymity to describe internal budget documents. In past shutdowns, inspections of chemical factories, power plants, oil refineries, and water treatment plants were disrupted because the Environmental Protection Agency furloughed most of its employees in charge of monitoring pollution and compliance. Some routine food safety inspections also stopped. The Small Business Administration might continue to make loans for disaster preparedness and response, but it would most likely cease approvals for other loan programs for small businesses. Head Start, an early education program for low-income children, is not expected to have major impacts immediately. Tommy Sheridan, the deputy director of the National Head Start Association, said in an email that only 8 programs out of roughly 1,600 total have a fiscal year that starts on October 1st, meaning that most programs would not see a lapse in funding this week. The 8 programs serve about 7,500 children. We have reached out to them, and so far all the ones we've heard back believe they will be able to stay open for a period of time, Mr. Sheridan said. If a shutdown stretches longer, though, especially into November, then a lot more programs would be impacted and some would likely have to close. How would a shutdown affect airports? Air traffic controllers and Transportation Security Administration employees would largely continue to work, meaning that airports would keep operating. But air travel could be disrupted if security agents stop showing up for work because they aren't being paid for the duration of a shutdown. That happened during the 2018-9 shutdown, when travelers faced long lines and closed checkpoints. Would mail still be delivered? The Postal Service would continue to deliver mail and all post offices would be open as usual. The agency generally does not receive tax dollars for operating expenses and instead relies on revenue from its sales. Would national parks stay open? It's unclear whether national parks would be open during a shutdown. In 2013, when the government shut down for 16 days, the Obama administration completely closed the national park system. When the government shut down for more than a month during the first Trump administration, many parks remained accessible to the public, even as most staff were furloughed. Services like restroom maintenance and trash collection were not offered at the time. That led to piled up garbage and illegal driving of off-road vehicles at some parks. On Friday, more than 35 former park superintendents wrote a letter to the Trump administration urging them to close the national parks if the government shuts down, saying the lands could be damaged with limited staffing. Do Smithsonian museums remain open? Smithsonian museums have sometimes stayed open for a short period immediately after a shutdown. During the first Trump administration, those museums and the National Zoo were...
All right, so it's not going to be that bad, you know what I mean, initially. If they can figure it out, you know what I mean, in a few weeks, you know, within the month, it should be all right. I'm not going to really read that. They didn't agree, you know what I mean? It's only 3 minutes, but they just didn't agree, you know. They're on both sides. The Democrats want health care. The Republicans are like, no. And so Democrats are ready for them to shut it down. And what they do shut it down, it's not going to come back the same. It's just not, you know what I mean? So we going to see. They said Tony Blair, he might be, I don't know why they picked him.
Tony Blair emerges as potential figure in post-war Gaza. This article is by Mark Lendler and read by an automated voice. Tony Blair, the former British Prime Minister, has emerged as a potential figure in the reconstruction of Gaza. He has been trying to build support for a plan that would create a Gaza International Transitional Authority, a UN-mandated administration that would include a multinational security force to stabilize the war-torn enclave. Now he has emerged as a candidate to head that authority. After President Trump released details of the proposal for Gaza ahead of a news conference with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel on Monday, Mr. Blair released a statement calling the plan bold. He added in a social media post that it offered the best chance of ending 2 years of war, misery, and suffering. For Mr. Blair, the Middle East is one of the most consistent, if contentious, chapters in a busy career after Downing Street. He served for 8 years as the envoy for the Quartet, a diplomatic group composed of the United States, the United Nations, the European Union, and Russia that tried, with little success,
United States, European Union,
to broker a peace settlement between Israel and the Palestinians. His appointment, which came immediately after he stepped down as prime minister in 2007, was divisive from the outset because of his support for President George W. Bush's war in Iraq, as well as his close relations with Israel, which led many Palestinians to distrust him. But Mr. Blair has also worked closely with Arab leaders, including those of Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, through his nonprofit organization, the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change. He defended his ties to the Saudi Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, despite evidence that the Saudi royal had been responsible for the killing of the dissident journalist Jamal Khashoggi. I don't think any of us who believe we should engage with Saudi Arabia has ever dialed back our disapproval of that, Mr. Blair said in an interview in 2024. But I do think that what is happening in Saudi Arabia is a social revolution which has immense and positive implications for our security and for the Middle East. Mr. Blair pointed in that interview to the negotiations among Saudi Arabia, the United States, and Israel over normalizing relations as proof of the value of engaging with autocratic leaders such Prince Mohammed. Those talks have been put on hold by the war in Gaza.
Well, all right. Can't lie. There's a lot of fucking stories. I do not know if I'm gonna be able to make it. I can't lie. You know what I mean? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I need to take a break real quick. You know what I mean? American support for Israel dramatically declines. Damn. I do not know if I'm gonna be able to make it. I don't think I can. This is just so many stories. This was 9 minutes. 5 minutes. That's like 15 minutes. This is 10 minutes. 25 minutes. Another 6. So it's like 30 minutes. Another 5. It's like 40, 35. Another 10 is like 45 minutes. Another 3, 50 minutes. Another 10, 60. It's an hour. Eesh, I don't got an hour. Hour and 7. Hour 20. Yeah, hour and 20 minutes. I don't got it. I don't got an hour and 20 minutes right now. Wow, that's a lot more stories to talk about. But yeah, you see the other stories, you know what I mean? I might do it part 2 later, but you know, I gotta take a break right now, so I'm gonna do that. You know, thank you for the couple people came through, hollered at me. And yeah, let's get it. Bye bye.